was a lot happening in South Australia this weekend, and it started with me reading one of the most useless and hypocritical political documents I've ever seen. It was breathtaking because the person who presented it has been at the root of the problems that he now claims he actually wants to fix. The author is Liberal Senate leader Simon Birmingham, who made the presentation at the South Australian Liberal Party annual general meeting. Now, before I get to the content, I've got to paint this picture of the last decade or so of the Liberals in SA. They've been dominated by an intolerant cabal of lefties who call themselves moderates, but who are, in reality, more Labor-like than Liberal in their policy approach. Birmingham, for example, he's the factional leader of the Wets in South Australia. He's basically embraced every lefty idea since getting into Parliament. He's pro-republic, pro-voice, pro-climate, apocalypse, pro-redefining marriage, pro-gender identity, pro-pronouns. By my reckoning, he's for everything except what the Liberal Party have always stood for. And if he's anything like his mentor, Christopher Pyne, he probably got a picture of JFK and Hillary Clinton on his wall, possibly with a few rainbows and unicorns thrown in for good measure. And one of these wet puppets even became Premier. And then Birmingham's wife became his Chief of Staff, and their factional ally was installed as a Liberal Party State Director, and they all took instructions from the former Minister turned lobbyist Christopher Pyne. Now, as an interesting aside, Pyne was canvassing for support to be a special nominee to the State Council, but he couldn't muster up the required support. The man who likes to refer to himself as the fixer looks to have now been fixed. Well, anyway, under that team of wet apparatchiks, we had the worst government in South Australia in memory. It was actually devoid of anything resembling leadership or vision for the state. And with the marshmallow as their public face, they were appropriately turfed out after a single term. Well, now the Liberal Party has told this motley crew of wets where to go. And as the factional winds have changed, they put their finger up and go, oh, we've got a new plan that actually undermines everything that we've done previously. To me, it's a desperate attempt to preserve power and try and remain relevant. So, to Birmingham's opus, it's entitled A Blueprint for Growth and Unity. Well, it could just as easily be labelled a manifesto of hypocrisy. You see, the paper decries a winner-take-all approach. It demands gender diversity and quotas. It laments the lack of members and decries factionalism. As I said, it's one of the most hypocritical political documents I've ever read. Let's briefly run through the 5-point plan, and I'll add some contextual truths to Birmingham's inconsistent message. First, there's a proposal for community pre-selections that actually involve non-members of the Liberal Party. The Wet faction, they always resisted every Liberal Party member getting a vote in pre-selections. You see, that meant it was because democracy meant it was too difficult to actually control people. And many years ago, they only changed their mind when the numbers made it inevitable. And they do that all the time because that way they're always on the winning side. But now, after years of condemning democracy in the Liberal Party, they want to open up to people who aren't members of the Liberal Party to vote in pre-selections. Yeah, I'll put my hand up to that. Anyway, after years of condemning recruitment of members into the Liberal Party, they've said it's branch stacking and kicked people out because they've been too affiliated with churches. Now they want to include people who aren't members of the party. But I have to point out Birmingham's plan excludes, quote, a community pre-selection for a seat held by an incumbent Liberal MP until there's a special vote of local Liberal Party members. Right, do you get that? Special entitlements for MPs, have a vote of the local members about allowing non-members in. Talk about having your cake and eating it too. Well, the second reform is about abolishing the special interest group entitlements that have long actually entrenched the wet factional base. These include the Women's Council and the Young Liberals. Now, of course, it's just a coincidence that the Wets have actually lost control of these bodies this year, and hence they no longer control the delegates. It's clearly a case of if the Wets can't have them, oh, well, then they're bad and no one else should be able to claim them either. Next, he goes on and says we need proportional representation for internal party elections. Well, forgive me, but after a decade of winner-take-all wet warfare, they've suddenly decided this is not a good idea. Again, the about face is because they've lost the numbers and are now in a position of loser loses all. And Birmingham even condemns the factional power sharing arrangements in other Liberal divisions. They're the things that we've commented on for years, about the grubby deals that entrench the power of factional warlords and spark even grubbier deals brokered by lobbyists who are keen to shape political outcomes for money. Next, Birmingham insists the Libs need a more professional state executive. Nothing wrong with that. As long as it includes a gender quota. I mean, nothing screams professionalism more than a mandated equal representation of men and women, despite there being no definition of what a man or a woman is. But, with the left of anything, you can probably guess for yourselves, anything will go. Except for merit, of course. That doesn't matter in dividing up the quota numbers. And I'm also not sure how the proposal to extend executive terms from 1 to 2 years will make factional hacks more professional. But apparently it will, you see. And Birmingham also wants to prevent family members and staff of MPs from filling roles within the state organisation. I must point out, though, no mention is made of family members being shoehorned into senior roles with inept premiers, so presumably that little scheme will still be allowed in the future. But in true democratic form, Birmingham keeps a position on the executive for the senior federal representative. Well, that would be him. And when he can't go, he gets to choose someone else from his little faction to actually represent him. Now that's what I call professionalism. And it brings me to point 5, the need to secure the best candidates. What the Liberals need, apparently, is a talent pool, with those embraced by this endorsement cocoon being given a quiet wink and a nod to pre-selectors. That's the one you should choose. And it's even suggested the local Liberal Party members can say they only want the talent pool candidates to be involved in this new style of democracy. It's a bit like guided democracy, if you know what I mean. And naturally, there are further references in this opus about needing more women and more diversity, which we could take more credibly if the Wets had a history of either backing women or diversity in anything resembling a safe seat. I'll give you one example. They had a chance in the formerly safe seat of Sturt. However, instead of backing a woman or a diversity candidate, the Wets chose a factional stooge who used to be the Chief of Staff to South Australia's worst ever Premier, Stephen Marshall. And yes, that meant that would be the person that Birmingham's wife replaced as Chief of Staff when the former Chief of Staff was promoted to the Parliament. Pretty cosy, huh? And the Wets have had numerous other opportunities to back in female candidates for safe seats, but they repeatedly chose not to. Apparently it was all about merit back then. Now it's about diversity and quotas. Oh, hang on, not entirely. It's also about power. This is a desperate last roll of the dice by a faction that has failed South Australian politics miserably. They've traduced every principle and every traditional policy in their quest to grasp and retain power. And now the Liberal Party has had enough. It's tossed the left power brokers out to usher in a new, practical, realistic, conservative approach to policy. And that renewal is all down to the hard work of Senator Alex Antic, who's inspired thousands to join the Liberal Party to reclaim the vision of a mainstream party grounded in truth and grounded in opportunity while eschewing cronyism. In that respect, we should all be cheering Senator Antic on.